There you go. Let's see how that works. There you go. Let's try that again. Forgot to delete the old ones. Welcome, Feast of Tabernacle, Day 2. Definitely give all honor to Yah through His Son, Yeshua Mashiach, the only begotten of the Father. Definitely give honor to the... Let's try to lean this down a little bit. Honor to the apostles, the prophets, the evangelists, the teachers, the elders, the bishops, and the deacon across the whole planet. Teaching this word to get people to repent from sin and come to this gospel. All the brothers and sisters out there keeping His commandments, His statutes, His judgments, His precepts, and His ways. Always upholding a high standard of holiness, which few people say they do, few people do. So it's hard for me to even find true brothers and sisters out there, you know, that really have a standard of holiness, that really have a strong relationship with the Most High. So all the ones that do, appreciate you guys. Thank you all. People trying to find a congregation or watch and support True Hebrews United by liking, sharing the videos, giving comments and whatnot. Appreciate you guys. You can reach us at 619-501-1375, or you can message us on the Facebook, or call me on the Messenger, and or call on the YouTube. Shout out to the angel, this one lady that texted me for counsel and whatnot. I didn't forget about you, so I definitely will link up with you when time permits. It's just the feast day, so I'm pretty busy. All you people out there, shout out to all the Kokab, Amira, all them and whatnot, and many more, but I just can't. I forget to write them down, or I don't remember all the names, especially when they're Hebrew names, because they're hard to pronounce. So, with that said being done, we're going to deal with the Feast of Tabernacle. Let's get into the book, and let's go from there. Amen. I just got off work, so you see my work clothes, but still be in whites. For you guys for you guys that probably wonder why we always do whites on the feast day, nothing wrong with wearing other clothing on the feast day and dressing up and whatnot. Not like how Baptists do it and they just come for a fashion show, but on the feast day, when we see in the kingdom, He's all going to give us white apparel, and so it only makes sense, or only seems right, to wear white for His feast day when we keep Him, because that's the color we're going to be wearing when we get saved. So that's why we wear white all the time for the feast day. So normally I have white pants, everything. You probably could check the pictures and see when we fully dress, but I'm teaching out of a canyon right now. Oh, by the way, for you people that don't want to make a boo for being lazy, that live in an apartment or say you don't have a place, this place is like 44 miles away from where I'm at. You know what I'm saying? So there's no excuse to live holy and live righteous. I'll deal with that later on. So let's go to Leviticus 23. We're going to start at verse 39. Let's get it. Also, in the 15th day of the 7th month, when you shall gather the fruit of the land, you shall keep the feast unto the Lord 7 days. On the first day shall be a Sabbath, and on the 8th day shall be a Sabbath. And I know there's some confusion, but remember it covers 8 daylights, because when sunset hits today, it technically starts, evening hits today, it starts the next day, but it's still somewhat light. So when you say the Sabbath night or Sabbath day, so when it says the 8th day, that refers to the end of the Sabbath. So when you have the solemn assembly, you're not going to have it the 7th day at night. You're going to have it at the end of the Sabbath day at day, if that makes sense to you. The last day, the Sabbath day, because when you say, oh, you have it on the 7th day, so then that means I have it on that night, at evening? No, you'll have it during the day. So when it refers to the 8th day, the 8th daylight. But let's keep going. And on the 8th day shall be a Sabbath. You shall take unto you the first day of broods of goodly trees, branches of palm trees, and broods of thick trees, and willows of the brook. And you shall rejoice before the Almighty your Yah 7 days. And you shall keep a feast unto the Almighty 7 days in the year, and it shall be a statute forever throughout all your generations, and you shall celebrate your Sabbath in the 7th month. You shall dwell in booths 7 days. All that are Israelites born shall dwell in booths, and that your generation may know that I made the children of Israel to dwell in booths when I brought them out of the land of Egypt. I am the Lord your Yah. And Moses declared unto the children of Israel all the feasts of the Most High. So praise the Almighty. So we got to make the booth, as you can see my posts and whatnot, and I need to put more leaves up here. So I'm not really going to deal with the whole Coleman tent or the tents from Sporting Goods Place and why that's not what the Almighty wants you to do. I'll probably deal with that later, but I'm going to deal with how do you dwell, because it says dwell in booths. So we do have not even a misunderstanding. There's brothers that like to sleep in their booths, and there's nothing wrong. 100%. Hey, I'm all for it. If you want to sleep in your booth, if you have that ability, depending on your location, you can and can't. Some people make a booth and it's snowing where you live, but you still need to keep the commandments. To dwell in it is just to hang out in it. What we tend to do when we're with the family or with the congregation, we try to make a booth and all of us eat under it. So when we meet up for Sabbath, we'll make a booth and all of us will come and eat Sabbath and fellowship and laugh and joke under the booth and rejoice before the Most High. So if it's just your family, you make a booth and you make it big enough to fit all you guys to make a table to eat, or you make a little small 3x3 booth because it's just you, and you just go and read 3 chapters every day for 7 days. You make your booth, and the Almighty sees that you're seeking Him and keeping His commandments. It says, when the Son of Man comes, will He find faith on earth? I'm not really looking at the camera too much because the sun's in my eyes, and we're going to deal with the booth because of that. So the booth, even though it's called Feast of Tabernacle, a booth, I should have got the definition for you guys, but if you want to watch the past videos of the other year of the Feast of Tabernacle, maybe 2 years ago or whatnot, it's what you see. It's the equivalent of what you know those little gazebos you have, and you slide up the pole and it makes a little pole. You see them at the beach or at the park and whatnot, little gazebos and whatnot, or a hut like in Hawaii, how they make the huts, or in Belize they make the little, with the palm trees, little hut around circle. That's a booth, and I'm gonna prove that with the book. It's not a tent, so this is why we don't get a tent, because it's a booth. This is what they built. And when they first came out of Egypt, they didn't come out with all these tents because they left their home. They left their home and they had to make booths. They didn't leave their home and everyone had an extra tent. Like if you left your home right now, how many of you guys have an extra tent in your house? If you had to leave right now tonight at midnight because all the firstborn were dead and you had to leave tonight, would you have time to leaven up your dough? And would you have, we just happen to have a 10-man tent in here. Some of you guys will have an extra tent, but if you're leaving your homes out of Egypt, you probably wouldn't have that. And what you need for shelter from the sun will probably be something that I just built right here, a booth. But that could be speculation. I doubt because there was like, 500,000 men ready to go to war, and not including women and children. So I doubt all of them had extra tents because they left in a hurry. So let's keep going, and I'll prove it with the scripture. Go ahead and let's give me Jonah chapter 4. Jonah chapter 4. Praise the Almighty. And even though I say these things, I still don't want to live off of speculation. Some things is called a safe assumption, meaning it doesn't say that the apostles urinated, but it's a safe assumption. We could conclude that they're human beings and they urinated. So there is some things, but sometimes people go way too far with their assumptions and they teach a whole doctrine on it. So I'm not going to say it's an absolute that no one had tents. Some of them probably did have tents because they had money, so they lived in a house in Egypt, and then they had an extra tent, so they took their tent with them. I'm pretty sure there was someone like that. But are there people that were just already living in tents and then they just packed up their tent and they smashed too? Maybe they were poor and they didn't have a house in Egypt. So let's keep going. Jonah chapter 4. We're going to start at verse 1. But it displeased Jonah exceedingly, and he was very angry. And he prayed unto the Lord Almighty and said, I pray, O Lord, was not this my sin when I was yet in my country? Therefore I fled before Tarshish, for I knew that thou art a gracious God and a merciful, slow to anger, and are great in kindness, and it repenteth thee of the evil. Therefore now, O Lord, I take Take, I beseech thee, my life from me, for it is better for me to die than to live. Then said the Almighty, does thou well to be angry? Does it profit you to be angry? Let's keep going. So Jonah went out the city. This is when Jonah, if you read the story, Jonah had to preach to Nineveh and whatnot. And so then he left out of the city. So then, verse 5, then Jonah went out of the city, and he sat under the east side of the city, and there he made him a booth. A booth. Now let's see if it's a tent. There's a difference between a tent that's fully enclosed and a booth. Let's see what booth he made, because I'm pretty sure he made it the same way Israel made it, because you had to take some goodly tree, well, not necessarily goodly trees, but some branches and some palm trees and something to make you some shade. All right, and booth, and sat under the sat in it in the shadow till he might see what become in the city. So he made a booth. As you can see, this booth, I didn't put enough leaves on the top, but it doesn't block all the sun. When you have a gazebo, and a gazebo is fully enclosed at the top, you know, fully enclosed. But during the time of the day, if you're at the beach or if you're at the park, you got to keep moving the gazebo because the sun moves and it doesn't fully cover you from the sun. You might be in the shade right now, and 2 hours later, the sun is beating on your face and coming in from the side of the gazebo. Either you move the gazebo or you got to move your towels or whatnot and adjust accordingly. So let's keep going. And the Lord prepared a gourd and made it come over Jonah, that it might bring a shadow over his head to deliver him from the grief. So Jonah was exceedingly glad from the gourd. So if it was a tent, the Almighty would not have to make a gourd to assist his booth with shade, just like my booth I'm under right now, and the sun is still in my face right now. But let's keep going. Verse 7, but God prepared a worm when the morning rose next day, and it smote the gourd that it withered. And it came to pass, when the sun did rise, that the Almighty prepared a vehement east wind, and the sun beat upon the head of Jonah. And Jonah, that he fainted and wished himself to die, and said, it is better for me to die than to live. So he made a booth, but the sun still penetrated. Even if the top of my booth right now was fully covered like a modern day gazebo or whatnot, sun could still get in if I'm sitting down. If I'm sitting down on the ground, or if I'm in this seat during the time of the day, sun will still get on my face. So it wasn't a tent, it wasn't fully enclosed, because there was no need for the Almighty to make a gourd to block him from the sun. And if he made a fully tent, because it says I make a booth, if he made a full tent, then why did the sun come and hit him in his face that he wished to die? Just think about it. But let's keep going. Let's go to Nehemiah. So just to let you know what a booth is, and go from there. Nehemiah, we're going to go with chapter, I believe, 8. Yeah, Nehemiah chapter 8. And we're going to start at verse... the last scripture. Nehemiah chapter 8, verse 14. And they found written in the law of Moses, written in the law which the Lord commanded by Moses, there we go, the children of Israel should dwell in booths in the feast of the 7th month, and that they should publish and proclaim it in all their cities and in Jerusalem, saying, go forth out unto the mount, and fetch olive branches and pine branches. Go forth out of the mount and buy a tent. That's not what he said. Let's keep going. And fetch olive branches. And remember, Paul was a tent maker. There was tent makers. The Apostle Paul was a tent maker. So it's not like they didn't have the ability to buy a tent to keep this feast day. It's not like today, how you buy a Coleman tent, like, oh, that's because they didn't have tents back in the day, so they had to build their booth. No, there was tent makers back in the day. The tabernacle was a tent. If these people dwelt in tents and when they were in the wilderness 40 years and 40 nights, so they had the ability to get tents, but he told them to get branches, get out of your tent for 7 days, and go make a booth and chill in the booth. Just think about it. Because they had tents. Because remember when he made manna fall down, and he says, hey, don't gather any on the Sabbath, and they went out, and it says everyone needs to stay in your tent in the Sabbath. Stay in your home in the Sabbath. You remember? So they had tents, but they still had to make booth. Because in theory, well, if I'm already living in a tent, I don't even have to make a booth. No. Go make a booth, because when you first came out there, you was dwelling in booths. Let's keep going. In the mount, verse 15. Fetch olive branches and pine branches and myrtle branches and palm branches and branches of thick trees and make booths as it is written. You make a booth. So, if they had a tent, because tent was made out of linen or wool, why do they need these branches for? Just think about it. Because the tents we had, biblical tents, they were made out of wool, linen, animal hair, or plant, cotton. They were made out of that. Same as your clothes. That's how they made their tents. So why did he tell you if you're going to make a tent? Who makes a tent out of that? Well, it's possible. You can't make a tent. Like, you know, there is ways to make it what you call a tent. It will really be like a hut or a cabin or whatnot, because you see, like in Hawaii or in Belize, they take a whole bunch of palm trees and they fully enclose it to where it's like a hut, you know, a fully enclosed hut. I want it kind of a tent, you know. You could say what the Native Americans do when they do the posts and they use fabric all the way around. That's a tent. I guess you could say it's a tent, but it's not. That's not even fully out of palm trees and branches. So let's keep going. So, verse 8, sorry, wind blew. So, verse 16, so the people went forth and brought them and made themselves booths, everyone upon the roof of his house. So they took these and made booths upon the roof of their house. And in their courts, in the courts of the house of the Most High, in the streets of the water gate, in the streets of the gate of Ephraim, and all the congregation of them that were come out of the captivity made booths and sat under them. They sat under them. For since the days of Yeshua, the son of Nun, unto the day of not the children of Israel have done so, and there was very great gladness. Also day by day, from the first day even to the last day, he read in the book of the law, and kept the feast 7 days, and on the 8th day was a solemn assembly according to the manner. So we see that they sat under the booth. So that's why I say, hey, if you feel and your conviction feels that you need to sleep under the booth and stay the night under there, that's fine. But you dwell in your living room, you typically don't sleep in your living room. You dwell in your kitchen, you typically don't sleep in your kitchen. You dwell in your backyard, you typically don't sleep in your backyard. So I'm not knocking the brothers that do want to sleep under there, but I would say if you're going to do it, then you need to do it according to the rule, and that's to make it with branches. Hey, I got some loppers and I got a pruning saw. I didn't even have much, and I made a pretty decent booth. I could have put more branches on top, apparently, because they dry up, but make your booth. It's not too late to do it right. Even though, it's not the first day, show the Almighty that you got heart. You want to be right. Like, Almighty, you know what, I didn't really do it according to the rule, but my heart is right, and I do want to finish up these last 5 days or 6 days or 4 days according, and I do want to make a booth, you know, and do it right. Have it in your heart, you know, to seek the Most High and go from there. There's few people that want to stand for righteousness and holiness. Few people, you know, few people. It says in the latter days, many will part from the faith, giving heed to seducing spirits and doctrines of devils. They will rather have a false belief that they're saved than to acknowledge that they're not saved, and they can repent and get saved. You know? So it's like, let's do what it takes to make it in. He's going to come back here. He's going to blow these trumpets. He's coming for his people. The Feast of Ingathering, Feast of Tabernacles. And let us be ready. With all that said being done, keep standing. Don't drop standards. Keep your conviction strong. Give the Almighty a hand clap. Shalom.